So maybe the second most common question that folks might ask is, can I get the code that you just wrote? The answer is yes. I created a GitHub repository for you all last night over here at github.com/MikeCKennedy, 10 tips, Python web devs. Try to keep it somewhat short, but descriptive. So over there, you can get the code. Most of it's already there because if we're going to cover 10 things, we can't write that many things from scratch, but we're going to play with the code and explore the code, and we'll write a tiny bit of code. I guess you'll call it code. Some of it'll be HTML. You could tell me whether or not that's coding. So yes, you can take your code with you. Here it is. I can pull this back up later or throw it into the chat if you all are interested. All right, now quickly, we're going to go through a bunch of different features and tools. And I want to point out that these 10 things we're going to cover, almost all of them apply across the spectrum of Python web frameworks. Not all of them. Some of them you can't use. For example, async cannot currently be used with Django or Flask, but I'll show you ways around that as well. That said, most of what you're learning here is not platform specific, right? It's not like, well, that was about Flask and I use Pyramid, so forget it, right? Now it's tools, techniques, design patterns, and things like that that are generally applicable. I also chose them for the most part as things that you can use in 10 to 20 minutes. You could just say, that's a great idea, I'm gonna do that. Or that's a great tool, my life is now better, quickly. Okay, so not big investments, and we'll just kind of go quickly through all of them, spend a little bit of time on each. Now, we're gonna start out on something that is super simple and easy, and just kind of get things warmed up. I'm gonna do a lot more Python code as we go, but I wanna just talk a little bit about HTML5 because the world seems to neglect HTML5 even though it should not. So let's go over here, go to PyCharm. As you can imagine, I'm gonna not use its Docker integration for a minute. So here is our code repository viewed from PyCharm, and we're gonna start in this section here. And you may not know that you can actually run just raw HTML files in PyCharm, but if you go over here and your mouse is working well, you can just run it.
Sorry to interrupt you. Hey, sorry to interrupt you. Someone asked if you could put the GitHub URL up again.
Sure, let me just throw it into chat. How's that?
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Sorry about that. I should have thought of that.
Yeah, no worries, I got it. Hold on, if I can select. There you go, folks.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. It's even better than typing.
Yep. Sorry
for
the interruption.
So I ran this cool little app that generates a startup name for you. And the name that it chose for my startup is FoxRem. You can all imagine what FoxRem is. It's my little startup. And whatever it is, you have to create an account for it. So over here, notice, first of all, we could have labels for each one of these, but we want a tight, cool, little modern looking login page. And there's no server, there's just this HTML file. So I've written some JavaScript to simulate what the server would receive when we hit register like this. And now you can see, well, full name, email, password, age, so on. This must somehow be involved here. So maybe I'll put my email here like so, my name, I don't know, my age, what am I, 46, something like that. That apparently is a password, right? So we definitely need to make this a little bit nicer, but notice also these things can be submitted empty, right? And apparently I also switch my name. So let's go do a few cool little tricks to make this better. Just use HTML5. So first of all, let's put some placeholders. All right, so you should always have placeholders. So this will be your name. This will be email, password, maybe capital P to be consistent. Placeholder is age in years, like so. And let's put, yeah, this one's already got its effective placeholder because that's selected. Okay, that is a little bit better. Let's look at this. Fully refresh it, right? So it's got, at least it tells us what goes here, but it doesn't have any validation. So obviously we should set these to be required. And in HTML5, you don't even have to have a value, true or false. It doesn't matter. It's the presence of this unassigned attribute is all that we need. So, whoops, that doesn't go there. That goes up one. So now if we do this again and I try to submit it, it says, oh, you got to fill this out. So, okay, this is Michael, and this is, I don't care, I'm just going to put stuff, right? And it's going to just accept that, even try to save it as a password. Notice that maybe we want to be sure that's a password. You wouldn't believe how many errors I get on my website saying, you know, from like MailChimp or somewhere where, excuse me, where you try to submit somebody's email address, it says that's not a valid email address because it's some rando thing. So HTML5 also actually has more than just text and password. It has a ton of stuff. Checkboxes, colors, emails, files, you know, months, numbers, et cetera, et cetera. So let's go and make these a little bit nicer. So here I can say a number. And in this FoxRem world, we have to have our users be 18 or older because we don't want to deal with whatever kids laws or whatever. So we can say that there's a minimum of 18. And for the password, we want to have at least non-trivial passwords. So let's say that the min length here is 6. So let's try this again. So now we come over here. Of course, these are all required. I'll put Michael. My email is, let's just say it's Michael for a minute. Password is the letter A. I love that one. Now, if I hit up arrow here, it automatically goes to 18 and it won't go below 18, right? But if I somehow type in 9, it turns red. That's pretty cool. And let's just hit go. It says, okay, you know, these have to be selected still. I gotta get that to not show that's canceling out the error. So I should probably disable that. But it's saying that this has to be an email address. Maybe if I take this away. Yeah, please enter an email address. So that's really nice. It validates that. AB, probably still cancel it out anyway. So apparently I need to use the letter. You notice even counts up as I go, and then let's go and select that. So finally, we got our nice little form, right? So here's a quick thing that you can do to just give much better immediate feedback, better validation, and it's ridiculous easy. I don't know why, you know, so many sites you go to, it's like just weird interactions. Obviously, you still got to validate the stuff on the server. We'll talk about that on section 7 or topic 7, but this is a super easy win that we can have for making our code better. Okay, so quick warm up there with that one. Now, the next one here, this one, if you haven't heard of it, it will open up some really powerful possibilities for you. Let's suppose that you're working with some kind of, there's two basic really powerful scenarios here. One is I'm working with some kind of integration and I'm having a problem. Let's say there's some site out there like Gumroad, for example. I have recently had to do an integration with Gumroad and it wasn't working. So Paul mentioned the PyCharm book I have. When you buy it, there's a way to buy the book and the course, but then I have to put you in the course automatically, maybe create an account for you. So I had a webhook callback to my site, and it was supposed to be passing some data, and it wasn't working. And I'm like, why is this not working? I'm testing for what it says I should be getting. The function's getting called. What's going on? And so what I did was I used this thing called ngrok to run my local server running in PyCharm. I press debug. I run ngrok, and it will, over SSH, securely expose your local server. I registered that at Gumroad, and I hit buy in a little test account, and then it stopped on a breakpoint in PyCharm, and I could figure out what was wrong. And what was wrong was the product name I was testing for had a space on the end in Gumroad and not a space in the end in my code. And that was incredibly easy to get to by having Gumroad call into my local machine being debugged. And ngrok is this thing that will let you do that. The other one is I'm working on a team and I have some web app that's in some state. I'm not ready to publish it, but I want to let people pull it up locally and try it out, not just see screen share of it. So ngrok, I could do that as well. So instead of going and setting up a whole bunch of servers and other little test environments and things like that, so you can, you know, in some test mode, have the webhook call something you've got running on AWS or something like that, or pushing out a test version to like a staging server just so somebody can see your changes. You don't need any of that. You just need ngrok. So let's go and have a quick look at that. So put this one away. Now I have a little app you can run over here, but I also need to run this one, and they have the same package name and they fight. So I'm gonna run the one over here, but they're basically, either one is fine. I just wanna run something. So here's a little Flask app I wrote. It's, it might look familiar. It's a clone of PyPI, including with the data and all sorts of stuff. So here's a little PyPI app that I've created. And what I want to do is let you all interact with that. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to go over here and say ngrok, and I want to tell it to carry HTTP traffic over to port 5000 because that's what's right there. So I hit this, and it gives me not just an HTTP, but even a secure link back to localhost. So I'm going to put this in chat, and you all can go clicking around on it and interact with. Look at that. Here you go. You all should be seeing the site. It might be a little bit slow because it's not a real web server. It's a dev web server. Oh my goodness, look at you all. So here, I'll pull it up as well, and we drop this in here. There you have it. Over HTTPS, here's our little site. I don't think you can actually log in yet. It's not quite that far, but you can come over here and check out this kind of stuff, and yeah, the site's working just fine. Isn't that cool? So let's suppose I want to make a change and we're working together. I want to say, hey, what do you think about this new homepage here? Like, let's go to the home. What if we just say find and install amazing or awesome Python packages? So if you go over here and refresh it, you should all now see a new title, right? So we could sort of dynamically work on this site together, even though you're not connected to my machine and I haven't put it out somewhere. I could even, like I said, do a breakpoint or whatever. Super cool, right? Okay, so if you want ngrok, there's a free version, which is what I'm using. There's a way to get a paid version so you get like permanent URLs and whatnot, but you basically install it, you run a simple command on the command prompt, and you're off to the races. So here's a really nice tool that you all can interact with and just bring into your workflow. Super easy. You can still see people are still coming in. All right, I'm gonna cancel that out. Sorry about that. Internet's gone for you, or the website's gone for you all. But isn't that amazing? We're able to just come over here and run our Flask app. Like I said, we could run it in the debugger if we wanted. And yeah, it's really, really nice. Excellent, excellent for doing integration work. All right, let's go on to the next topic here. And Paul, stop me if there are questions, okay?
We have a couple. You want to take them now?
Sure, why not? Before we get on to the next topic.
Okay, that ngrok thing is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, I learned something immediately. Somebody asked the question, can you go back to your HTML file? And then go to the top. All right, somebody asked the question, how do I know looking at this whether this is HTML5? And line 1 tells you.
Yeah, right there, exactly. It doesn't say HTML5, it says HTML, because previously these were all like crazy schemas that, it looked more like this than it did like this.
Yeah, it was a 3-part thing that was 5 trillion characters long, and no one understood.
Are you expressing it's like HTML 4.1 or 4.2? Exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of craziness. So if you see just doc type straight up HTML, that means HTML5. Yeah.
All right. And last thing for the moment, for anybody interested in front end stuff, I haven't announced it yet, but I'm going to do a webinar on React, TypeScript, and test-driven development in PyCharm, looking at October 16th for that. All right.
Wow, that sounds awesome. Cool. I might have to attend that one. Thanks. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is a pair of async things. First, I want to talk about async and await on its own, and then I want to talk about how it fits into the web world, because that's probably its most useful use case. Now, I feel like async and await gets a lot of people saying, oh, async is really hard, so be really careful. And I think actually it can be done the wrong way, and in Python it can be complicated, but I think the async and await features that came in 3.5 make it really, really powerful. So let's talk real quickly about how that works. One way that we could do async concurrent programming is we could create a bunch of threads and run stuff in parallel. We hit up against the GIL for computational stuff, and that makes it a little challenging in Python. We could use multiprocessing and achieve the same thing by using processes instead of threads. But with async and await, we do something different. We say, look, there's only one thread, but everything that we're doing, it's waiting, right? The word await is right there in the API. We're waiting. What are we waiting on? We're waiting on a call to a database, the file system to get back to us, a Redis cache. We're waiting on the internet. We're doing some kind of request type request out, request the library out to some other external API. We're using something like Stripe to charge a credit card. We're waiting on them. That's what websites basically do, is they wait. So imagine we could break up our work, our tasks. Each color here represents a single task. We could break it up into the parts where we're doing work and the parts where we're waiting and separate those. So the green part, let's take the pink one. So the pink one, it does a little bit of work, and then maybe it's going to make a call to the file system to figure out something. And then it needs to wait on the file system to do its work, go to the disk and touch, physical things and get that information back. That's that gap between the first two pink bits. And then maybe it's going to make a call to the database, say, hey, database, I found this on the file. Do you have it stored already? And it's going to wait for a while, just waiting on the network. And then the database can get back and it's going to do a little more work. That's that last pink bit, and decide whether or not to commit it. So if we could take a single task and break it up into these parts where our program is working, and then we're waiting on something else, network, disk, other database, things like that, we could actually slice this up cleverly, internally, kind of with generators and coroutines, into these little bits, and then just run them back to back. Long as all the other pieces are waiting, maybe we can run some other piece, right? So like while the pink task is waiting, we could run the second green bit because it's got a little thing to do, and the first start of the blue bit. So we can break our tasks into these little pieces. And this is how async and await works in Python, right? We're waiting on some form of IO, and while we're waiting, we're able to break our bits, our functions into these little pieces. The pieces that we break them into, that's up into the point where you say the keyword await in the programming language. So every time you see the word await, it's creating another one of these colored slices. All right, so let's go write some code that does something fun with that. That is not the editor I wanted. Okay, so let's go over here. Now we're gonna go and run this simple little program, and I'm gonna teach, Paul, I don't know if you've even heard about this library. I'm gonna show you something new as well, maybe. So what we're gonna do is we're going to go and we're gonna do something that looks like it's fun and async and fast. It turns out to not actually do any improvements. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna go and we're going to come up with numbers 220 up to 230, and we're gonna pass it off to this function called get.html. And what that means is go to the Talk Python to Me podcast and get the full content of the show page for episode 220, 221, 222. Yeah. It's going to pull it back, and the goal is to turn that into the pure text, and then from the pure text, it's going to use Beautiful Soup to get the title, and then it's going to tell you the title. Now, put aside the fact that, yes, there is an RSS feed. We could do this all at once. That's not the point. The point is we're going to go get a bunch of pages and get their titles. I just don't want to pick on anyone else's website, okay? So let's talk through really quick how this works. We're going to set up an event loop. This is kind of clumsy. There's a cool library called Unsync that makes it better, but we're going to create an event loop, and we're going to call run. And it's running on this main thread. There's no threads other than the main thread here. And it says get title, old range, old version. So here we're going to say we're going to create an async method, and we're going to await getting the HTML for episode 1. And then, right, then going from there, like running that code and that down to here again, that's the next colored slice, if you will. And it's going to wait on 221 and 223. Now, if we run this, it's not actually going to be faster because we're not doing more than one thing at a time. We're saying, go get the first one and wait till it's done. Then go get the second, then go get the third. But it'll give you a sense of what's happening and what it would look like in a serial mode if I actually ran the program here. So you see it's going out and it's actually getting the titles. So, right, fun and easy 2D games with Python, with arcade, hunting bugs in tech startups, and Python and digital humanities, and so on. Okay, so it took 8 seconds to do that in serial. What we really have to do to make this work is we have to do more than one thing at once. So what I'm going to do is use this actual thing that we want here, this method, and it's going to go and start all of those tasks running and then wait for them one at a time, but they're all running. So let's just go change this out real quick, like so. Now watch when this runs. They're all going to go off, bam, they all come back, bam. So it goes from, what was that, 9 seconds to 1 second. And if you look at the ping time, I'm on the West Coast US, servers in New York, it's like 100 milliseconds just because of speed of light or something, the internet. And if we go get 10 things, we already have 1 second of just network traversal time. Forget whether or not the server can handle all the concurrent requests and stuff. So by doing it in parallel, we can convert that 1 second wait time to 100 milliseconds because they're all happening at the same time. The internet can definitely take it, but in fact, it's much, much faster. So I'll run it one more time. They're all out, boom, they're all back. Now the way we're processing them are in order of the way we started them, but they may be finishing sooner, right? Like maybe this one finishes first, but then we wait till this one's done and this one's already done by then we just get to that one, okay? So super, super cool, this async programming model. The new thing here is you can't use requests in order to do this, right? A request just doesn't support async and wait. It doesn't have a async version or anything. There's a cool library called HTTPX, which is pretty new. It's the request API plus an async API plus an intermediate parallel API, as well as HTTP2 support and a whole bunch of other stuff. It's a really cool library, so I wanted to give it some attention as well. So
It's
it's nice.
also HTTP2, correct?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it does a bunch of really cool stuff that is on top of it. What I like though is it's the same API as requests plus, right?
Yep.
So if you're already
Right.
deeply invested in requests, you don't have to go, well, I'm going to restart with async IO or AIO HTTP client and we're going to rewrite that whole layer, right? This is kind of like, it just gets a little bit better. There's some nice intermediate, not quite full async stuff you can do as well. Okay, so let's see how are we on time. Let's just go ahead and just look at this next one here. So this next thing I want to show you here is another Python app, and it just basically does web services. And what does it do? It does two things. Let's go to the views, forget the services for a sec. All right, so it has two things it can do. It can go and get you the weather, or it can tell you about the sun, like when is the sun up and when is it down and when is it at peak, based on where you physically are. And the way you interact with it is you call this thing, you say my zip code is such and such and the country I'm in is US or GB or something like this, right? And it has to do two things. The sun service that we're integrating with actually takes a latitude and longitude. We're not asking you for your latitude and longitude because do you know what yours is? I don't know mine. It's just above 45. It's something, but that's about it. That's all I know. So we're going to ask you for these, and we have to hit one endpoint to actually figure out what your longitude and latitude is, and then we feed that over to the other API. So if you look at how much work is this code doing on our server, almost zero. It's taken in a few variables. It's doing the route data to get them. If we go look at this location service, it's constructing a URL. It's actually coming up with some, I don't remember, you can put it into cache mode because I was doing some performance testing to see how much faster this would be in a certain library I'll tell you about in a second. And it was overwhelming the server and crashing it. That's kind of how async works, is it puts a series of whipping onto the APIs you're talking to. So I had to do some caching, but let's just focus on the real one that does work. It goes out and it basically creates a session and then waits for it, right? And then it just creates a dictionary. The amount of work we're doing on our server is insanely small. And similarly, for the other one, the Sun service, we're coming along, we get the URL, and then we just convert from, I think we're just throwing away AM and P. Like there's some data we're throwing away, and we're just printing that out. Really, really simple. So this is the perfect candidate for async and await because the our actual load on our server is incredibly small, but it will block up our server if we just call blocking calls on both of these. We're at the mercy of how fast they respond, right? So we can handle hundreds or thousands, easily thousands more concurrent requests by just putting the word await right here and async right there. The challenge is Flask, Pyramid, Django, none of them support this. None of them. There's plans for Django 3.0 to start supporting that, but this is far out. Flask is thinking about how they may support it. And yet, watch this. That is not it again. I got to stop running the wrong one. Watch this. So we go run this one. And I click on it. And I go down here and let's go to the sun one. That's the more interesting one. There we have all the data about where I currently am and the sunrise and sunset and all those kinds of things. Cool, huh? So apparently it works. How does it work? It works with this library called Court up here. So Flask, Court, similar types of server things, right? Court is a library that is basically 100% compatible, including the plugins and extensions for Flask with Flask, the API wise. Notice here's a blueprint, that's a Flask thing. But its routes are async capable. They don't have to be. They can be normal ones or they can be async. But if you make them an async method, it knows how to process those and spread the load. It's really, really sweet. So all you have to do is do a find and replace for the word Flask with Court. If it's a lowercase Flask, it's a lowercase Court. If it's an uppercase Flask, it's an uppercase Court, for example here, right there. All right, and otherwise it's the same. So here's a really simple way to bring this async stuff, at least into your Flask code. There's a bunch of other newer web frameworks like Starlet, Molten, Sanic, these types of things, Responder, for example, from Kenneth Wrights, that also directly support async and await. But the more traditional ones don't, and Flask has this parallel called Court, which is pretty cool. Okay, unless there's questions, Paul, I'm moving on to the next one.
One question, 1 point. On the point, Michael, did a webinar with us a number of months ago about async and await, and I think it pointed to a course that you have. Is that correct?
I do, yes, thanks. I have a course on async and await, and not just async and await, also on threading and multiprocessing
Right.
and using Python for computational parallelism and all sorts of stuff. Yeah, so over at training.talkpython.fm, yeah, check it out. It's one of my favorite courses because it really, I think it demystifies a lot of this stuff. Like people make async sound so incredibly hard, but honestly, how does this code over here, let's go over here. How does this code look without async? It looks like this, like this, like this. Like that's it. It's this beautiful way of bringing basically the same API, like programming model, this sort of serial programming model, and making it async friendly. I really like it. So.
And kudos on your talks and your course. You use a lot of diagrams to help explain the concepts because people wind up asking the same questions over and over.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that.
I pasted in the chat. I pasted a link to the recording of our webinar, and also a talk that Lynn Root gave at PyCon. I pasted that URL. It's a very good talk about async and await. Someone asked a question. You're mentioning a lot of cool Python libraries, and can you maybe the GitHub repos, README, could you maybe put some links in there?
Yes, for this one in particular, I would look at Awesome ASGI.
Okay, that's true.
I can mention that, but this one, there's a bunch of awesome lists, and this one is actually all about ASGI is async.
Server gateway interface.
Asynchronous server gateway interface, as opposed to WSGI, just the web server gateway interface. Thank you, Paul. And it talks about all the different frameworks some of them that I mentioned here. Yeah, I can definitely put those in there, but let me just drop this here for now as well. I got it pulled up. Okay.
All right, and one last thing, our mutual friend Chris May asked a question that I'm like, I don't know. Can Responder work to bolt on async capabilities for certain routes, or would it be better to think through another way?
Yes, Responder has I believe, I tried to pull it up. It seems like it may have probably some Let's Encrypt certificate is expired and somebody should address that. Anyway, put that aside for a second. Responder has a cool feature, I believe it's Responder, that will let you route part, it can become part of a WSGI existing site. So you definitely can do that. You can have some of your code handled by Responder and other code handled by something else. Another thing that you can do that's pretty easy is if you're using Nginx, which we're going to talk about later, get to in a little bit, is you can use proxy pass on Nginx. And so what you can do is say if somebody requests / give them just the regular application. But if they happen to request / API / something, give them Responder or give them Starlet or whatever. And you don't even have to configure that at the Python layer. You just configure that at the Nginx level, and those didn't even have to be the same machine. But as far as it looks like to the user, of course, it's the same machine. Just Nginx is proxy requesting down to different layers, either different ports or different machines, even based on something like /API versus not.
We always forget Nginx, don't we?
We do. It's a sweet thing. All right, let's talk about databases for a minute over here. So if you're going to talk to a database, I strongly encourage your first thought to be, maybe I could use an ORM or ODM, ORM being object relational mapper, ODM, the document database equivalent, object document mapper, because it lets you have a nice, clear way to get to your data. You're not just working with dictionaries and kind of untyped randomness, and you hope that you get it right in your code, but no, here's some some classes that they constrain what types you have. They even give you cool type hints in PyCharm, for example. So if I go over here, we have this one called migrations. And again, this is our little app. I'm going to run it first so I don't forget. There we go. And we've got this data layer, and this is my model again for pypi.org. So let's go, package is pretty interesting. So over here, we have a SQL Alchemy model deriving from SQL Alchemy base into a table called packages. And you can see it's got a primary key, which is a string. It's got a created date, which has a default to come out right away, and it's indexed and all sorts of sweet stuff, right? So to do a query with one of these things, I can go over here to this little data layer that I got, and get a package by ID. So we can call this function. It's going to come in, and it's going to create a session, unit of work style, create a query based on package. It's going to do a join against releases, that relationship, so that you don't have to go back and make a bunch of queries. And then it's going to say, give me the package where the package ID is that, and give me either the first one you find, which should be the only one as a primary key, or none if there were none, okay? So this is a really beautiful way to program against complex data models. Let me throw out one other little cool tip for you. Normally, if you don't put these type hints in here, like so, and we're to come down here and make a package, like this, p equals package, p.id . Oh, this is pretty good. Yeah, you guys are doing good. I give you some credit there. A lot of times, PyCharm's getting better. A lot of times this will come up at being treated as a SQL Alchemy column and not as a string or as a datetime, right? So if you put these in here, your things like MyPy and stuff will know, okay, that's actually meant to be a datetime, not a column. Anyway,
and you kind of make the point is that just because PyCharm figures it out doesn't mean MyPy will, or some
or
other
even
tool.
or VS Code or whatever, right? There's a bunch of tools that are not as clever as what you guys are doing.
And
so
equally, we have to do a lot of work to hard code it to work with a particular SQL Alchemy, maybe even version, much less anything on the planet. So your point about type annotation stands.
Cool. Well, what I use all the time is Mongo Engine, because I prefer Mongo as the database. And yeah, it doesn't do that, right? So if I say, no, this is actually a list of strings rather than like some embedded list field thing, yeah, then I get much better. The PyCharm is much better for the rest of the flow. All right, so this is great, right? So over here, let me go back to where it's running, and I click on this. We've got our app is running. That part's not finished. In my little demo I copied, but you see, here's the package that we pulled back. Beautiful, right? Well, what if I decide here? Let's go up a little. What if I decide up here? Oh, in addition to the author email, we want author Twitter. Okay, seems totally simple. Let's just go back and rerun our app and just carry on about that, right? Let's go check this out. Oh my goodness, what is this? Well, SQL Alchemy knows that there is some kind of problem. It's like, I know what the tables are supposed to look like, and my table doesn't have an author Twitter, so we're in big trouble. What are we gonna do? Well, one thing we could do is we could, by hand, try to continually maintain the shape of the database so that it's in sync. I could go create a column like this and say it's a string and whatnot, and then everything would be golden. It would work, right? But that's probably not the best way, especially because SQL Alchemy will originally generate all those tables for us. So what can we do? Well, we can use this thing called Alembic, which is also created by Mike Bayer, the creator of SQL Alchemy. And if we come down here, you can see I already have this Alembic folder. So what we would do is, if I wait for my little presentation assistant to go away, is down here, I'm in the right location. No, I want to be in EX05. There we go. Cool. So I have this, and I could say Alembic. Once I've pip installed it, I could say init Alembic, and that would initialize this folder to be or this project to be managed by Alembic, and it would create this folder structure here. And then I have to set over here, I've got to set a few things. I've got to set a connection string to I'm just using SQLite, so over to that. And in the environment, to do a little bit of a trick to be able to tell the target metadata that it is this SQL Alchemy base, so it knows about all of the entities that it could potentially have to manage. Then I can ask questions or ask Alembic to do jobs. Like I can ask Alembic to say, go and create some database migration, some scripts that can be applied to my database to make it work again if I make any changes to my data model, right? So I could first of all say, what level are you at? And I can come over here and actually see there's something that is adding some column here, which I think I actually deleted, but it'll come back anyway. And I'll just leave it. So that's good. And then the other thing is we can say Alembic, see if I've got it in my history. Yeah. So I can go create a revision and auto generate. Let's go. I think I want to delete that one. Probably be sorry about that, but let's do it. Adds author Twitter. So what it's going to do is it's going to look at our current models, look at what's in the versions, which right now is nothing. And I might have to clean out one little bit as well. Anyway, it's going to apply those changes, and it should generate something that will fix this problem we run into. Let's see. Yeah, hold on. That's why I shouldn't have done that. But I get to open this up in PyCharm, which is always fun. So under the schema, you have this Alembic version, which here is always set to something like that. So I'm going to delete that row. I'll just do it like this. There. Oh, you guys. One equals. There we go. All right, let's see if this will come back. Okay, so we can run this. And it says we've created this migration over here. And if I can trim this back a little so we can all see what's up. It says it has no base version, but it is this version. And what it's going to do right here is it's going to go to that table and add that column, and it's going to make it nullable. And it's also going to create an index on it. And if I want to undo this, it's going to go do this. Now, you might think, okay, this is super. It looks like everything is good now. So if I run my app, hopefully that's running the right one, it's going to be fixed. No, it's not fixed. That didn't change anything in the database. All that did was create a script or a capability that could fix it. So the last thing to do is say Alembic upgrade head. So upgrade to the latest. So what's going on with you? Yes. Where this table, column, author Twitter, duplicate column name. Not sure why that would be in there twice. Normally this works beautifully. Let me go over here. Now, I think it's this thing here we have. Let's just go. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on with it here, folks.
See, this is a nice thing about screencasts is you just edit that part out.
You definitely edit this part out. Yeah, I don't know. I don't see why I would have a duplicate column, but you know, maybe.
No biggie. Concept's the same.
Yeah, I think I'm just gonna keep rolling, folks. But normally it was just upgraded and off it goes, and the thing is fixed. So yeah, check it out. If you're doing anything with SQL Alchemy, use Alembic. If you're doing anything with Django, use the Django ORM migrations. Other libraries as well have them. For example, Masonite, the framework, has that built into it as well. So there's a bunch of cool things. But if you're working with ORMs, definitely use migrations. And this normally works really well. So not sure what's up with it, but it's now shut down. So we're all good. We're going to go to the next one.
In fact, one could argue that it proves its worth instead of this happening in production when you're like hand editing the schema.
That's right. That's right. You don't want to do that. Check those things into source control as well. All right. Now, the next one is Paul talked about sort of rich front-end frameworks. Now, this is mostly a Python thing, and generally, I would say I'm not a huge fan of using Vue.js for all sorts of stuff or rich front-end JavaScript frameworks as the primary way of writing web apps. But certainly there are pages and parts of your application where Vue.js makes tons of sense, or other rich front ends like Angular or React, where you want them to stay on the page and the interaction is super, super interesting. So I'm going to show you something here and some cool PyCharm support for that as well. So let's close those up. So the next one is this thing I'm calling Movie Exploder. Let's go and run that. So it's talking to this movie service that I created for some of my courses just to have nice endpoints to play with. And I can click here and say, get all the sci-fi movies, like here's Inception, Star Wars Episode 5, and things like that, right? There's a bunch of things you get. It doesn't have tons of data, but it's enough to play with, okay? So notice up here that this is a pure HTML, just HTML5 static file. There's no server backend. It's talking to that service. But we can come down here. We can do things like, here's The Godfather. It has to do with crime. Let's see all the crime movies. So you click on that. It shows these. You want to see thriller. Click on those. Or action. Here's all the action ones. You can pull this down. Notice as I'm clicking on drama, it's changing the combo box here. If I search for fun, see funny people, and it drops this down, and I could just say top 10 of all of them, and super cool interaction like this, right? Somehow that landed with the same one up front, okay? So this is Vue.js. It's incredibly easy. It's about 100 lines of both HTML and JavaScript combined to do this entire application. And let's just go see how that works. So first, go over here. Notice we've got this, go a little farther. Here, we've got this div we're calling app, ID app. And we come here and we say, this thing has a model of search text. Yeah. And we have a key handler or event handler for when you click enter and you let go. It's going to do a search down here. If the selection changes, we're going to call load genre, whatever the selected item was. And then we're just going to do a for loop, a v4 through here. Now, for PyCharm to know about this, let's see. I think this is already here, but for some reason, I'm not sure why it's not picking this up to turn on the Vue.js support. So go away. Yes, see, just had to restart it after running npm. And it now, notice how the colors just changed. So now this is purple, and these don't have any errors. Sometimes they'll have errors around them. This is orange. It knows these are functions, but watch this. It knows that when I say vmodel, this actually ties back to the Vue.js app right there. So we have, this is our data that is two-way bound to those elements, like the list that you see, the results that show up, that's this. The combo box is that. The selection of the combo box is that. And when we click search, for example, it's going to figure out the URL, and then it's going to call load movies down here. And load movies uses this super cool API called Axios, which is the best way to go do. It's like the requests of JavaScript, right? You can just go call these APIs really well. And this is it. Like this entire application is built in this super, super simple way. So just for time's sake, I'm going to keep on rolling. But I definitely recommend, if this is the kind of app you need to build, then check out Vue.js. All right. Next, let's go back over here and look at this app. It will look similar, but it's not exactly the same. All right, so here we are. Try to use the same app, but different elements. So let's go over here, and if I try to log in, it says, actually, let me turn off the HTML5 bits. I could leave it, but there we go. So let's let it hit the server. I told you that you need to have validation both on the front end because that's nice, but on the back end, you have to have it because it's super easy for people to say, you know what? I don't care about your front end stuff. I'm going to use just some API or like something like request or Postman and just go directly against your server. So we want to have things like, hey, your email is required, or your password is required, or things like the user couldn't be found. We also want to exchange the data, the two pieces of data here, email and password, back and forth between our server-side code and our HTML without our Vue methods getting more and more and more complex as the forms get more complicated. So I'll talk quickly about this pattern called view models. So over here in our views, we have an account view. There's a bunch of view methods here. For each one of those view methods, like for example on login, we have this thing called a login view model. The get, it just shows the form, it's super simple. But over here, we're going to say login and then validate. And if there was a problem, we're going to take that data they submitted and put it back in the form. Otherwise, if it was all okay, we're going to go, use the data from the view model and carry on. All right. So check this out. If we go over here, we can derive from this view model base that knows how to exchange data with the view by just basically converting to a dictionary. And we can have it pull data out of the form. We can have it pull data out of the query string, the routes, wherever it needs to come from. Routes is a little bit more complicated because you got to pass it in Flask because the way it comes in. And then we can add this validation, like probably a validation we should have if not self.email. Self.error equals email required, and do the one for password. We run it again, go over here. Let's start from scratch. And I hit go, it says email is required, password's required. Now there's no account with this, right? What you should take away from this though is this part over here got no more complicated as I added more validation. You can have more and more data exchange. You can have more and more validation and more nuanced stuff there. And it's still just line 66. There's no more to it as that. And it lets your Vue methods just focus on what they need to do. So this is a super cool pattern for modeling in a class the data that's exchanged between HTML and the Vue, as well as the validation. All right, for sake of time, let's keep rolling here. The next thing to talk about is Docker. With Docker, we can take these web apps that we built and we can package them up into these containers and either run them on something like a Kubernetes cluster where we don't even have to think about the infrastructure, or at least have perfect control over what we're sending up to the server to run. So what I have here is a two container application. There's the front end and there's a web service. And I can just go over here and I could, let's see, copy the path, get out of the way, assistant thing. I need my terminal. Okay, we go over here and I could say docker build dot, and it will go and we'll build it, as you can see that it did. And then I could run it, but then I'd also have to build this next one and run it. And then I've got to run them the right way, and I've got to set up the right port mappings and all that kind of stuff. So what we're going to use instead is Docker Compose, which PyCharm has sweet support for. Like, look, I could even just run those services, run Docker Compose up, that's killer. So if I just define this simple YAML file here that says I have a base server, which I just need to build to the foundation of the other ones when they get built. And then I want you to run Nginx here and then run this Python app here. This is actually the movie exploder that you just saw, and this is the services that back it. So let's go over here. And I can say docker dash compose up, or I'm gonna go and try it. Apparently I can now, this is new, I can now press this here, and this is gonna bring it to life. Give it a second. Yeah, looks like it's working, beautiful. So if we go, you can see all the pieces that are running here. You see there's the server and the front end and the log from it and so on. Let's go and see if we can watch the log for this one. Yeah, you can see it running right there. That's beautiful. So if we just go now to local host, there's the movie exploder, and let me just click around a little bit on it and go back. You can see the backend service container part is connected to it, and they're talking to each other over Tob and Adventure and Fantasies and so on. Isn't that cool? And apparently the PyCharm support's even cooler because that is something new. So well done, guys. All right, so that should just do docker down. Maybe I got to stop it up here. There you go, stopping them again. Really nice way to bundle these things together. And Docker is a great way to bundle your stuff together as well, and just in general. All right, we've got 4 minutes, and I got to do 2 things. First of all, I created this cool site. Let me see if Bill SSL. Here, this is another example from a different class that I created, and it's a bill tracker. Okay, so it's cool. It has like it's like Mint or something. Here's my bills. Oh, I owe $200 on outdoor stuff, and I come over here, and I could pay $10 on it, and it refreshes here. Or I could pay. Let's see if I can get this so it doesn't. Let me zoom this out. Just comment on server-side apps. This is pure server-side all the way across the U.S. If I pay another $10 and I hit enter, notice how quick that, like, there's no JavaScript. This is all full page refresh, right? It's beautiful. Pyramid, by the way. So this is great, except for the user experience is not incredible. If I click up here, it's not secure. You probably want secure for your bills. And if I pull up Chrome, it actually says not secure in the title bar. So let's go to this server and make it secure. And I've got a couple minutes to do that. You might think, no way. No way. Probably not the ACP bit. Okay, so here's the server. I set it up last night for you. I went and I installed this thing called certbot, okay? And certbot, what it does is it will manage, let me see if I can find this file. It'll manage the Nginx, speaking of Nginx, Paul, file for us. And it will go and create an SSL certificate, and it will rewrite our Nginx configuration file to automatically support SSL.
That's insane.
Right now you see it's only listening on port 80. Watch this. So then I say certbot, I think it's -nginx. I got to look in my notes, -nginx -d and give it the domain. But let's just, let's not. So here's the steps you got to do. And then I got to change the domain because I set up a new one. Let's go with that, like so. So I run that line over here, like this. It says I got to put an email address. No thanks. No.
And this is going to rewrite my Nginx comp file?
Yeah, but hopefully not your original one. Hopefully you're copying that one in there.
Yeah, true.
Right. Yeah, but it will. So I've got to agree. I don't want you to send me an email. I've already signed up for that. So it's going, and the reason this is on a real server is this domain has to resolve or it won't generate it for you. They've been saved. Could not automatically find server block for build tests. Hold on. Seems like it should. Oh, I see. Well, I understand why you wouldn't. Let's see. Nano. Oh, this is going to add 30 seconds. Sorry, folks. I guess if there's only one, it just listens for all of them, doesn't it? Do it again. Let's replace. There we go. And it says, do you want to have it automatically redirect insecure requests or secure ones? Yes, please do that. And then we're going to say service restart. Now, if I just go over here and I refresh this, boom, secure. That's it. By letsencrypt. And that's it. And it is so incredibly easy for you all to do this. Like there's almost no reason if you have control of the server to not have SSL when it's like those couple of lines. So definitely do that. The last thing I want to show you. Also, you need to be sure to refresh that certificate every 3 months. So you would say certbot renew to run that at least once every 3 months or it'll expire, which is what I think happened to a responder. Now, final thing. Let's go to secure.py there. Now, you might be guarding against some kind of security issues or other problems on your site, like cross-site scripting or injection attacks, things like that. Another reason to use ORMs is they're not susceptible to injection attacks unless you abuse them, things like that. But there's actually a whole host of things you should put into your app, right? There's things about allowing people to embed iframes and all sorts of weird headers and stuff. So this library integrates with all of these frameworks, Pyramid, Flask, Court, CherryPy, AIOHTTP, Starlet, and all you have to do to use them, let's go over here real quick. I know I'm getting low on time. Just give me 2 minutes and we're done. If we go over here and we run this, and oh yeah, I think, oh, look, I got to do this. I got to mark that as a sources root and then try again. So if we come over here, and we could click on it, but that doesn't matter. Let's go and look at it where we see more details, where we can see the headers more clearly and stuff. So let's go over here and just make that request. And notice we have 7 headers. There they are. And we're getting actually 4 response headers, content type, link server, none of the stuff that OWASP suggests we should have. So in order to do all the fancy integration with this, check this out. In order to do the fancy integration and secure our app, we need to add this one bit here. Hook a after request thing method and go to secure headers and just say add the right ones for Flask. We rerun our app. we re-request. Now we have secure transport security, X-frames options, cross-site scripting protection, et cetera, all set up and maintained as that library evolves over time. Beautiful, huh? And it works with all those different libraries. It's not a Flask thing, right? Like I said, it's Pyramid, Django, et cetera. Super cool. So love it that they have such great support for that. So I think that's about all the time I have, even though I could say lots more. So thank you. Follow me on Twitter. I'm at mkennedy. Check out, a lot of this stuff came from our 100 Days of Web in Python course. Check that out at talkpython.fm/100web. And as Paul mentioned, if you want to do more with PyCharm, check out the book over at effectivepycharm.com. And with that, Paul, kick it back to you, man.
Lots of questions, lots of things to follow up on.
All right, super. Let's do it.
All the way to the very end, this was fantastic.
Thank you.
That secure.py thing I didn't know about, and the regular reminder that Postman is the way to be thinking about things is good too.
Thanks.
The PyCharm team says thank you for the love on Docker. They work hard.
Yeah. You're welcome.
And thank you for putting type annotations in your Python code. And for all of you
Always
out there that are haters, suck it.
It's just so nice. It really lights up so many features of awesome editors like PyCharm that if you just put it at the base layer, all of a sudden it takes off. Yeah, it's great.
Yep. Okay. And thank you for the shout out to Pyramid. Several things. I'll give you a cream puff to get started. How about that?
Okay.
And you have to keep your answer under 4 hours. It's your favorite topic, Mongo.
Okay. Oh boy.
Your thoughts on Mongo mapping better to app logic than SQL?
Yes. What's next? No, just kidding.
On, man.
So here's why. I showed you the migrations and how cool it was. I almost showed you. I attempted to show you how cool it was that we can have these classes that map over to the database. Here's a package and here's the stuff in the database, and we can fake out this foreign key, this join over to this other table and things like that. In Mongo, you don't do that. It just is this shape. If you want the releases listed in the package, well, the releases are in the package. It's like the shape that you want in your Python classes in memory, that object tree, that is what you store in MongoDB most of the time. It's the most natural mapping there is. And I just think it's great. Like, for example, final thought, all my sites, none of them have, other than the RSS feed, which is super hard to compute, there's no caching, and it's still 10, 20 millisecond response time across the board. So, yeah.
And I pasted into chat a link to Michael's MongoDB course.
Thanks. And I have a free one too. So if people want a short free MongoDB course.
All right, cool. You don't have any books or anything, do you?
No, not on that.
All right, cool. Do you have any Talk Python episodes on Mongo that they should go back to?
I do. Probably the best one, probably the best one is one with Rick Copeland. I don't remember the number, but it was about like applied design patterns for MongoDB and modeling and stuff.
Okay. When you were going over the Vue part, just a friendly reminder, I'm surprised at how many people don't know this. PyCharm Professional bundles WebStorm, our IDE for web stuff, and DataGrip, our IDE for SQL. And over the past few years, the support for Vue, Vue.js now Vue, has gotten pretty good. And Michael showed a few of the things like navigation between things and autocomplete and refactor rename, and all those kinds of things are quite valuable.
Like autocomplete out of that model into here, like that's pretty hot right there.
Yeah, you're like sitting in HTML and it'll jump over to the JavaScript side for you. I mean, it's pretty cool. And this next one's going to be this is a question for me. You seem to have done a lot on your site and your courses and stuff in the last year to kind of take a leap forward on the web front end to include native, right?
Yeah. We now have
just maybe 30 seconds about what's been your experience trying to be more competitive with mobile app.
Both super exciting and super frustrating. So on the pure web side, like I'm doing a bunch of stuff around the web platform that is is going to make a big difference. I'm building out some stuff that people don't see yet. I've really done a lot of work on the course consumption experience. I definitely wanted to have an offline experience, so I built the apps, and this is where the frustrating comes in. So I have two mobile apps, one for Google Play and one for the App Store. They both talk to a ton of API endpoints that are written in Pyramid and Python running on the back end. And that's beautiful. Building the apps has been pretty solid. You know, compiled, deployed apps are kind of janky a little bit every now and then, but it's still okay. But App Store, gatekeepers. Basically, it took me 2 weeks to convince Google that the phrase "you can learn Python with our courses" is not trying to infringe on an app called Learn Python. That was a discussion ongoing for 2 weeks, that those are not the same thing. For Apple, we're now in a standoff where they won't let me publish updates to my app until I integrate single sign-on, or not single sign, in-app purchasing, even though all the other competitors don't have that and are perfectly happy on the App Store. It's just stuff like that. It's similar frustrating things with single sign-on integration with other people, but it's really fun. It's really great to be doing these things, and Python is so powerful to make almost all of this possible, except for the mobile side of the mobile apps. But still, integration back into the site was wonderful. But there's just, you know, as you start to branch out into some of these things, you really start to bump up to some rough edges that other ecosystems apparently deal with all the time.
Okay, next
But a lot
one,
of fun.
maybe you and I will disagree on.
Oh, controversy. Let's have it.
Is there a good reason to use Docker for a single developer instead of the traditional localhost dev environment? I am the latter, and Docker is. I'm gonna, as long as I can duck it until I age enough to retire from the industry, I will.
I don't know. We disagree that much. I
All right.
considered originally when I started deploying my apps, talk Python training, there's a bunch of services and stuff that you all don't see, like little microservice things all over the place that could potentially be in there. But when I started to put it together, I started to think, well, how am I going to do this in Docker? And then I realized, well, but I control the whole server, and it's adding DevOps complexity for, I don't know, just sort of running code complexity. And for me, I decided, like, I already have servers to run. I don't want to run like a Docker server and Docker instance it. Like, it just, I don't know. I didn't really go for it, but I do see, I mean, I certainly see some value, mostly in the multi-container. I need to run all these things and get this huge, like, I need this server just this way and that thing connected to that and so on. I can see the value for it, but honestly, I don't use Docker a ton in my day-to-day.
All right. Well, good. We
So
agree.
not so much controversy. Maybe we're just both old guys. I don't know.
Okay. I
Call it
believe.
experience.
Yeah. Hey, we're not old. We're experienced. The last one is an easy one. Can you bring up the URL to the Humble Bundle and talk about it a little bit?
Sure.
Someone prompted us for that, so thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, folks, for whoever prompted for that. So this actually covers a ton of stuff. I touched on a bunch of stuff that we covered here. So the Humble Bundle it's got 6 days left. Wow, down to the almost minute. 6 days, $867 worth of stuff for as little as $1. And it's got the MongoDB course, which you mentioned, Paul. It's got the PyCharm book, which we've mentioned. It's got some other courses, the async course. It's got a lot of good things in here that people can check out, some Flask stuff. Yeah, actually the top tier has sorry, I pointed at PyCharm itself up there, but the top tier has the PyCharm book that we discussed. So a lot of cool things, some stuff from the Code Challenge guys, real Python, Python morsels. You should definitely check this out. It's like, I considered buying it myself, but I literally have everything on here except for Python morsels. So I'm like, all right, maybe I don't actually need to buy it, but I consider it anyway.
And an aspect to it, I like yours, since I'm talking about you, is that these are all independent publishers, right?
Yeah, every one of these here is like a small company, you know, a handful of people involved in it, right? Yeah, these are not big companies. So this really supports a bunch of small companies in the Python ecosystem. And it also supports the PSF. I'm not exactly sure the recent numbers. I haven't checked in like 3 or 4 days, but it's well over 20,000, I believe, going to the PSF
Wow.
already. Yeah, which is huge, right? Their entire fundraiser they ran globally for like a good part of 2019 did 67,000. So like this is a big a boost to the PSF.
All right. We'll switch back over to me. We're out of questions. If there are any further questions, we'll get to them later. Let's see. All right, back to me. Good. We're switched. All right. Wow. That time passed really fast on that. There were so many great things in there. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us, Michael, about Python. These tips on web stuff, async stuff, containers, all the yummy goodness. And hey, dude, I learned some things today. Thanks.
Super. You're welcome.
If you'd like any more information on PyCharm, please go to our website at jetbrains.com/PyCharm. We'd love your feedback on this webinar. Feel free to say, Michael Kennedy's awesome. Please bring him back more often. We know, but you can go ahead and tell us anyway.
And
feel free to contact us on Twitter or in the after webinar survey. The recording will be made available on our YouTube channel soon. We will watch that and go ping Michael if there's a question that we need answered that we can't answer. If you haven't already, please check out our PyCharm blog. On our blog, you can find up-to-date PyCharm news about releases and events. Lots of stuff going on this week and next, in addition to educational resources. So for example, the recording of this webinar will be published there in a few days. We'll also provide some additional links and information from Michael's presentation on the blog. That's all for us today. Hey, Michael, thank you again.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Thanks, PyCharm team, and everyone who showed up. Thanks for attending.
Yep, thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a nice day.